thought, and so thought there, and I was like, okay, when it comes down to it, I can fix how people meet online, right? We can connect people better across time and space. But what I can't necessarily fix is how people are interacting with each other. Because at the end of the day, people are going to people. But what we can do is we can give resources to folks to better interact with each other. And that is absolutely tremendous when it comes to being able to give folks these really, once you say it out loud, they may feel extremely obvious, recommendations or just tips that once they make those tiny little tweaks, they make a dramatic impact in terms of how they're being received on social apps, whether that's romantic or platonic. So, in terms of what the online landscape looks like currently in terms of asking for dating advice, for those of you that are lucky enough not to be in that, just a quick rundown. Typically, what we see is a lot of folks are posting on platforms like Reddit, right? And they're asking things like, what kind of messaging in general do girls want on dating apps? And then in different Facebook groups, you have women asking each other, girls, how are we responding to how's this dating app been treating you? And what would you be interested in meeting up sometime? Both are like facepalm emoji, right? So we have these different folks sort of talking into the void across each other, and no one is benefiting from that, right? So Intraflirt University really looks to step in to that place and be able to answer these questions. So on the culture of how are people being educated on the world of dating and how we do it. TikTok is a huge one, right? A lot of the very sticky content on TikTok is not necessarily the kind advice. So something like, I went on a first date. What is wrong with you? You're hearing a lot of these horrible first date stories, but you're not necessarily getting good recommendations in terms of good quality hey, this is how you can have a successful date, or this is how you write a successful message. We also have Love is Blind, that is super sticky on the cultural zeitgeist, but again, not a good example of how we should be treating each other, especially if you are on the dating apps. And then you're having news articles like, are you stuck in the dating app burnout cycle? Also, if you Google currently dating advice, right, you get websites like this that are just very overwhelming. It's hard to sort of figure out where to go. And then once you start double clicking, you can see YouTube channels with advice videos. But when you're looking here, right, one of the videos is waiting to meet Mr. Right, right? Or how to tell your parents about your boyfriend. But that implies that somehow you were able to get a boyfriend. And so Intraflirt University is really looking to step into filling some of those gaps. There's also a little bit of content out there. You can either get a dating profile makeover session, right, for $199 for a 60-minute session, but really that only helps you with the dating profile itself, right? It doesn't help you necessarily beyond that. Someone has also paid a dating coach to $15,000 to help them navigate that space. And then there's also, these courses for men that are priced around $600. Um, what do some of these courses look like? You're getting like the $300 um, courses that sort of look like sales pipelines, right? They're sort of memeified, looking for the finance bros, looking at dating as a sales funnel and how do you increase the top of funnel and then get someone to the bottom. So that's why we built Intraflirt University. It is very much sort of a tough love, big sister, practical advice course. We are made up of 20 sessions, everything from photos, tips, and tricks to attachment styles and why those are important. How do you message someone? And then we also have a spicier one, right? Safe and sexy digital communications. So we are very much running the gamut of wherever you are plugging into this dating journey, there is something for you. So let me quickly give you a couple examples. The most basic session is setting the foundation. One of the courses that we do have in here that I think surprises some folks is hygiene. And the reason why we have that is because there's this massive gamut of people who may have not necessarily been taught how to have good hygiene. And that is obviously something that is so wildly important when you are navigating the dating space. So, what this looks like is we have a 15-minute video for this course. But what we also have is an attached PDF. I love when people want to just read through the PDF because that means they're not watching the video on me. But as you can tell, we also have everything from scent blindness is real, right? Because what we see time and time again, you know, typically on the more neurodivergent autistic communities is they'll sniff their shirt and say, "Oh, this smells fine. I'm actually going to wear it." But the problem is they've gotten so used to their own scent, they're not able to smell if they do smell like BO. So we're also talking about facial hair. In that video clip, I'm talking about how men love to talk about their glorious Gandalf beards. But the problem is that's not necessarily what women want to see when they're swiping through the apps. We also have a Tough Love Basics course that I really love. And here are just some slides from them. You know, you may feel defensive during this presentation, and that's okay. Pay attention when you do. Because that growth and that education starts where defensiveness ends. We talk about the cycle of self-sabotage. A lot of folks are typically, feeling burned by the dating apps. So they come off as closed off, as uninviting. They get fewer matches. They feel rejected and unseen, and then they update their profiles to seem even spicier. So here we talk about like what Chihuahua mood is your profile giving, right? Are you the nice Chihuahua or are you the mean looking Chihuahua? People don't want to connect with a stranger's worst self, so they can't expect others to do that for them. So something like, whatever, I've tried this dating crap and it never goes anywhere. People say that they want something real, but only swipe for looks. Then we have the nice version. So this is very much some very real feedback about, what does that look like in practice? We also have things like the landscape of a new one-to-one connection, right? A lot of folks are really excited when they meet someone that they want to talk to, but all they want to talk about is their special interest. So here we really remind folks about boundaries, comfort zones, interests, and then meeting in the middle. And we also give extreme like examples of what does meeting in the middle look like, right? I'll ask a question for every question they ask me. I'll match their energy on communication. And I'll pick a date, location, time, plan that's also convenient and accessible for my match. We talk about respecting boundaries so that there are no questions in there. Just want to flip through a couple more examples, making a good profile. One of the things we see is folks tend to write what they think would be cool, but we want to remind people that they're not trying to attract a best friend, right? So Call of Duty marathons and binging takeout on the couch is real, but if you are a cisgender, heterosexual man looking for a woman, that's not necessarily what you want to be putting on your profile. So here's an example of who is my profile appealing to. It's very much written to speak to women. And then here's an example of one that speaks more towards men. We also have examples of what does a good profile look like, what does a bad profile look like, or not bad, but what does a profile look like that could use improvement. And then a hack for taking photos. We also recognize for folks on the spectrum, they might not necessarily have a ton of friends that they can ask to hold the camera. So that's where we do step in and say, hey, here is a fun, easy hack that you can use to capture better photos for your profile. So in this case, we say, just prop up your phone and take a quick video of yourself, sort of like try and make yourself laugh, feel really comfortable. You're going to feel incredibly awkward when you do it, but then review the video and find the screenshots where you're like, oh, that actually that looks like me, right? When I'm naturally smiling. And then you can actually pull those photos. The video with the door was too embarrassing for me to share, but I like the photo. So and then in terms of pricing, we give unlimited lifetime access for $250. So that does work out to about, I'm horrible at math, you guys. I'm so sorry. But about, $12 a class. And considering every single video is between 6 and 23 minutes long, each PDF is between, 8 to 13 pages. They're getting a ton of content. So we're really excited to be introducing this to the world. We also are totally open to talking about partner pricing just because we do realize that the rising tide lifts all boats. The content's created, folks might as well use it and be able to access it. So definitely please feel free to reach out. Also totally open to doing free sessions on how do you just make a better profile. Happy to do a session like that with any of your students, just because I do believe that once we teach people to sort of represent themselves better on the apps, that's going to make it for a better experience as a whole. Even on, other apps like Hinge or Tinder or Unipie. Thanks so much, all.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Stephanie's good to go. Okay.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Tanya, for the introduction. I will repeat a little bit of that. I am Stephanie Supa. I joined UniPie actually I was sitting at a bar and I met Thomas, the owner and the co-founder and CEO of UniPie. And we got to talking and he explained a little bit about what he was working on and what he was building. And I was drawn to helping him with this goal. So I actually work in the ad tech space. That is where my passions lie. I've worked with startups. I've worked with established companies in the customer success space. But something about UniPie and the mission really had me want to join forces with Thomas, and so here we are. So UniPie comes from two words put together, uni and pie. The idea here is that pi goes on forever, and uni is becoming one, right? So to become one forever. And that is the start of UniPie. So UniPie is a dating platform. We do have a mobile application on its way. And the idea truly is to simplify the dating experience for the neurodivergent community. So UniPie did originally start specifically for the autistic community, although we realized that other folks who have been diagnosed with ADHD or Tourette's or Down syndrome also deserve the opportunity to find love through an easy to navigate format. So with UniPie, we also offer a full ecosystem of support. So relationship coaching, career coaching, blogs, and a dedicated podcast. So what sets UniPie apart is really that it's one dedicated to the neurodivergent community. What that means is that we are thinking a little bit more about the safety of that community, certain characteristics that community may possess, and how UniPie can help with that. Ultimately, we've noticed that a lot of organizations tend to really support neurodivergent individuals under 17. So a lot of children. And then as neurodivergent folks get older and become adults, there is a gap with some of the support that they receive. We've also noticed that there is a large gap in the support for dating, as Lise and Thomas have both identified in the marketplace here. And so UniPie works to solve that gap. So ultimately, again, we kind of differentiate ourselves between the general dating apps, the standard dating apps, mainly because we set it up in a way where folks do have a little bit of a safety net behind the scenes. So there are technical advances in place that are monitoring interactions and communications on the site as well. And certain keywords might trigger an alert that is then reviewed to ensure that no one is doing any sort of cyberbullying, and that there truly is no, harassment on the site. In addition to the actual dating site aspect of UniPie, we also focus a lot on different resources. So, as I mentioned, we do specialize in dating coaching, relationship coaching, and career coaching, because it's important to just know how to navigate a relationship. As Lise pointed out, even for neurotypical individuals, sometimes navigating relationships can be difficult. Navigating relationships in the workplace, navigating relationships, with someone that you meet at the grocery store, someone who cuts you off in traffic, someone who, is mean to you in a parking lot. So then you add the layer of neurodivergence on top, and we just want to ensure that that folks have the ability to really focus on those relationships and build those relationships. Then you incorporate dating, where you've got feelings and butterflies and all those things that about relationship building kind of go out the window. So to have that one-on-one opportunity where a coach sits down with an individual, can get to learn them and also teach them about themselves and how to navigate those relationships was really important to us. And in addition to that, we also have expert blogs, podcasts, and community discussions. So we're located in the Northeast, in the tri-state area, and so we ultimately will go around to different organizations and have discussions or mock date events with different neurodivergent organizations, giving them the opportunity to practice some of those dates in person. And getting to feel uncomfortable and getting comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. And even practicing, I'm not interested in this individual. What do I say to be able to get up and walk away and leave this date? I'll back up a little bit and share also a little bit about Thomas. So Thomas actually was involved in a community in college related to neurodivergence. And at his senior year, he decided to create a computer game for children that helped them to identify facial expressions. And this grew as he also noticed that one of his friend's sisters who is neurodivergent was having a hard time meeting people, making friends. And so he actually thought about how can he use his technical skills and create something that bridges that gap, and helped her to make meaningful connections. He also is a father of two, and it hits very close to home for him, where he wants to ensure that his daughters can grow up and find love no matter what their situation, and do so in a safe and supportive environment. So I will just showcase a little bit here of what the blogs and other resources look like on our website and soon to be app. So you can see here that there are just a whole myriad of different topics. How to be your authentic self, different social interactions. Perhaps there's some quotes from different folks in the field who are experts on different topics. We also bring that into our podcast. So we often have guests that can provide really valuable information to our listeners. So, similar to Lise, right? Like we have to think about those hard conversations that maybe parents don't feel comfortable having with their neurodivergent children, or maybe you as educators have been asked but don't know how to broach that topic. And then having these tools to say, well, there is an expert in the field of sexology who can walk through that type of information, or even listening to a podcast and potentially understanding how you can better support your students. And as I mentioned, we have one-on-one coaching. So the first session is always free, where the individual can understand if they like the coach, if they don't like the coach, if they want to continue working with the coach, ask some, intro questions, and really understand how it would benefit them to work one-on-one with a dating coach or career coach. I'll also showcase just a little bit of the dating profile. For any of you that have been on a dating site and filled out a profile, they tend to be very, very long. They ask tons and tons of questions. It's almost exhausting to get through all of those questions about yourself. And it also leaves very little to be desired. If someone can read everything about you, what questions are they going to ask? They can't ask you about your dog if you've just laid out everything about every pet you've ever had, right? So this is short and sweet. I'm missing a couple of sections, but it does kind of showcase, your character, personality, basic information, some mild interests. We ask about movie preference, about music preference, things of that nature, to just be able to get the conversation started. But all very simple, all multiple choice, all very easy to fill out. And then you have just to showcase of the profile. So you can set your filters to minimum age, maximum age, and distance. So you put in your location and it will map out anyone that's in your general area. You can always expand that if you wish. At UniPi, we do, it's a little bit of a balance. We want folks to be able to come to UniPi and create lasting relationships, even if that's online. You might find someone in someone's profile that is a little bit farther away, but has a lot of interests as you, and as the person on the dating site, and that's okay, right? We want folks to, again, create relationships. However, we also are very supportive of folks getting out into the field and truly meeting these people that they're looking to have long-lasting relationships with, right? A lot of people are looking for love. A lot of people are looking for physical touch, and that only happens if you meet those folks in real life. So distance is, an important part of this filter here. Just another showcase, as you, everything is really easy to navigate, like I mentioned. So you can see here that we've got the main profile picture, a little bit of an about me, but then also as you scroll down and learn more and you see those items like the personality information and the characteristics, you can also see different photos throughout that. So all very linear, all very easy to navigate and understand who you are, who you're interested in. So at UniPi, coaching is only $60 a session. And of course, we give the first 30-minute session for free. Coaching is an hour long. And then our membership is $9 a week or $29.99 a month. We are offering 20% off currently, as we just relaunched our new website. So I put that code here if you do have anyone that's interested in joining and is looking for that discount. It is certainly here. I won't go too much farther because I do just want to be respectful of time, but I did want to showcase a little bit in a few of these slides on some different things that we bring to our community events to share with the individuals that we're working with. So as a neurotypical person, we may feel that some of these things are rather obvious, that you wouldn't want to give someone your social security number. However, someone that is neurodivergent may not be thinking about that top of mind when they meet someone that they're excited to know and eager to be in love and create those relationships. So we have a few safety tips here that are things that are just important to know, right? Very basic, but also very pertinent. So meeting in a public place, not giving away your phone number, not even sharing where exactly you work. Someone's always going to ask you, what do you do for work? But if you work at Taco Bell, perhaps not saying I work at Taco Bell at 123 Main Street, where, it can then become, an issue if you're just meeting this person for the first time, right? Um, some, basic do's and don'ts, right? Choose an appropriate setting, some things to keep in mind prior to going on those dates, planning an experience and outing that everyone will enjoy, clean, comfortable clothing, right? Again, kind of those things that, that Lise was touching on in kind of those educational sessions that are important for these neurodivergent folks to kind of keep in mind that maybe they're not thinking about. But also going on a date and thinking about how long do you plan to stay? How are you getting there? What may you need? And also, if you're not enjoying yourself, again, what is a polite exit phrase that I can have prepared? So if I need to go, I can go. So again, oops, little glitches here. All right. So do's and don'ts, right? Again, just some things of like how to respect boundaries, what not to talk about, what to talk about, and making sure your phone is fully charged, right? I mean, we're all addicted to our cell phones. We know that we're not going to go anywhere without even a backup charger. But for someone who's not thinking about those things, these are important, just small things to have in our back pockets as support people, educators, support teams to help these neurodivergent folks just make sure that they find success in their dating experiences. So these are all in these slides. I imagine that they will be shared with you. But I just wanted to share a little bit about, again, kind of what we try to do in our in-person relationship building sessions. And then also what you can find, some of this information is all in our blogs and oftentimes mentioned in our podcasts.
All right, great. Thank you, Stephanie and Lise, for sharing information today with us. We'll open the floor at this time for anyone who might have questions. While everyone's thinking of their questions, I've got a couple in mind. I think the first one that comes to mind for Stephanie and Lise, I'm curious about how you measure or seek feedback on the effectiveness of the information and the supports that you share with participants.
So we do have feedback loops in for UniPie. We do send out emails to our members, often asking for feedback. We have had a couple of testimonials. We have had a couple of folks that have found love and gotten married from their relationships on UniPie. And then also we do ask for feedback from both the individuals and also parents if we have those relationships after our coaching sessions.
Definitely on our side, what we've done before launching IntroFlirt University is we would have monthly sessions via our Discord community. And a lot of the topics are pulled from what the community was asking for in terms of the content that they wanted. And traditionally, we would hold two of them, one for American hours, one for international hours. And it was so much fun to see some of the goblins actually take notes. And they would be furiously writing down, they'd be asking questions. And so what we're going to be doing as well, as we've just partnered with an influencer who actually reached out to us being like, this is the content that my followers have been asking for. And so we're going to be launching we don't know if we're going to call it truth bombs or what we're calling it, but giving folks the opportunity to submit anonymous questions about dating, relationships, sex, and have us answer them live on Discord. Very much like no judgment, right? Do you want to know if women actually poop? Because when we don't, but we do joke about it all the time, but creating a safe space where people can ask the questions that they might be too scared to ask their friends, right? And there's going to be no collecting of identifiable info, and just create a really fun weekly Discord sesh where people can hop on anonymously and be like, hey, so I've actually been wondering about this. Can I get clarity? And responding in a really kind, gentle way, but making it super fun. I don't know for those of you that are around, my age, but I grew up listening to Loveline with Adam Carolla, and I forget the other guy, but I created such a safe space to be able to ask those questions and get that info, because the problem is if your friends are not dating, they also don't have the answers for you. And oftentimes turning to the internet creates these really horrible dark holes in terms of going down and getting the responses that you might not necessarily want, or like they're unkind. Reddit can be just like a place full of assholes. So really creating a kind corner of the internet. And we're excited also to sort of be an extension in terms of also being able to point people to Unify on some of those things as well.
Thank you.
If folks have questions and just, want to put your hand up, Tanya, or I can call on you.
We have a question in the chat. How have you collaborated with the autistic community in developing your app or curriculum?
Is that a specific question for Elise or just in general?
I think it's probably for the two of you.
Yeah. For either of you. In general.
Sure. So I can talk about just the Unipie website. The technical creator of Unipie. So Thomas is the founder, but our technical backbone is actually part of the autistic community. And so there has been a lot of focus on making sure that the ability to navigate the site is accessible and simple for the autistic community. In addition, to Lisa's point that there's the opportunity in the future to gather more information from the community and the autistic community, neurodivergent community. For Unipie specifically, we are often taking what we assume to be some of the largest gaps and issues within the autistic community, and then focusing on creating our podcasts, our blog posts to kind of counteract some of those things that we're finding the gaps on in the field.
On my side, I built goblins. And the interesting part was I was like, oh, I'm just combining two things that I love, which is meeting people and World of Warcraft, which I'm not allowed to play anymore because it was extremely addictive for 6 months. And what I realized was whenever people would run up to me and take a goblin sticker, they'd be like, this was built for people like me. And I was like, well, tell me more. And so what I started seeing was a trend of folks that, whether they were clinically diagnosed or, just self-diagnosed, everyone, for the most part, identified as autistic. And so for myself, that was an interesting experience because I had not identified it as autistic up until that point. And I was like, what are the chances that I have accidentally built essentially this virtual clubhouse of folks that keep joining and they are all, self-identifying as autistic. And so I've been on a little bit of a journey myself in terms of being like, does that diagnosis sort of like fit? And so as we've been building Goblins and by extension also Intraflirt University, we're not necessarily building for the autistic community specifically, but we are taking into account ways that we can extend it, right? So similar with the hygiene section, right? If we are writing for a neurotypical audience, we might not necessarily shout out, you should change your underwear every single day. But by doing that and making it, including that information and making sure that we are making the copy extremely easy to read, right? It's very literal. It's very practical. We are including examples, right? Because for us, it's not that hard to make it all inclusive. And we certainly have been sending it to some goblins who are really excited to give their perspectives as diagnosed autistic individuals. And what's been really fun to see as well is how sex positive the community is, right? I joke where I say the Venn diagram between gamers and the neurodivergent community and also sex positive or LGBTQIA, oftentimes that Venn diagram is a pancake stack. So we are very much always having those types of communications with folks, always open to feedback. And we do have an Intraflirt University After Dark that's being lined up and very much taking into account, a neurotypical, for example, wouldn't worry about the texture of sheets, right? Or a particular sound. But that is all things that we are taking into account because our audience tends to lean on the spectrum a little bit heavier than most apps.
Great, thank you. Alyssa, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you both, Lise and Stephanie, for your presentations. It's really cool projects that you're working on. You may not have like specific numbers for this answer, but I was curious, on your platforms, how like the frequency of engagement with the educational materials, that come in from my work for a college autism support program. And sometimes when I try to have these conversations or groups, we want to jump to, well, I just want to get out there. I just want to date. I don't want to meet people. I don't want to learn or like do a class on it. So I'm curious, like what engagement has looked like and what you feel like has made that engagement successful.
Sure. So on our side, we actually have not even officially launched Goblins. Up until recently, our team was basically myself and then an engineer working on the platform in her free time. So the primary sort of engagement area has been Discord. So we do have a dating app. We have a dating trenches channel. And that is probably one of our most engaged, vibrant channels in the Discord because folks are asking questions about dating. They're giving each other advice. And when we were actively marketing, we would see anywhere from 20 to 25 people joining these, we used to call it Goblins University sessions, where we would talk about, hey, how do you make a better profile? And what we did see as a result of that was a lot of goblins said, we took your advice, and I changed my OkCupid profile. I made it as weird as possible, right? Because one of the things we advocate for is don't just try and be like cliche and sort of like palatable to everyone. You actually do want to have people opt out of who are they talking to, right? Because then every single interaction based on that is going to be significantly easier for you. So lean into the fact that you like to crochet Pokemon characters if you were a guy, right? The right person will like you, and then you're off to a tremendous start, as opposed to saying, oh, I like hiking and breweries. Meanwhile, you have never been on a hike. And so the feedback that we're getting has been extremely positive in terms of people being like, I took your advice and now I'm dating someone off of, Hinge or OkCupid. So for now, we don't have hard numbers, but we do have that sort of like qualitative evidence that it's working.
I was just trying to rapidly log into my Google Analytics to see if I can give you some hard numbers, but I can't do it that fast.
Try, good attempt, Stephanie. I'm kind of curious from the audience, what kind of relationship or dating issues you see in your students, or do your students share those types of concerns with you? And if so, sort of a two-part question. Are you comfortable in providing some sort of advice regarding relationships and dating? Is that something that you do? And then the other part is, do you feel like the platforms that have been shared today would be something that your students would benefit from?
You can just unmute or raise your hand. What are you all thinking?
I got something to share. How are y'all doing?
Great.
My name is Frank. I work at UNC Charlotte, and so we started a program for neurodiverse students, but mostly focusing on ADHD and ADHD-like experiences. But we have a lot of autistic students who have found us too. And so I have like a collection of students who these small cohorts we do each year that I sort of work with and I'm talking to and engaging with over and over and over again. And so I'm always looking for more things to do. I think one of the things that we found and I have found is working with these students is the social belonging piece is the piece that we make the biggest impact and I get the most questions about. And I'm like, well, and I, in the past, I was a matchmaker. And so I'm like, well, I want to hear about this because I'm like, I'm always trying to bring up questions and talk about topics and go outside of the box. And, they obviously they look at me and they're like, really? Yes. And so I'm always sort of looking for an opportunity to sort of get in there. But I think my students would definitely benefit from this. I think really what I wanted to hear, and I've heard some of it, is how do you just start talking about the conversation? I can talk about dating advice, but I haven't had a lot of experience sort of helping folks who are neurodivergent, even though I've had a lot of interaction with them for the last 5 years or so just trying to figure out a way to sort of maybe see them beyond the classroom a little bit more. And so this is kind of stuff helps me. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Mhm.
I will say what's been really fun about Goblins Universities is, or Intraflirt University now, is when we have the Q&A session, it does take one brave person to ask the first question, and then it sort of like breaks open everything. So potentially, there are certainly ways that you could be like, hey, student that is also a theater kid in their free time, right? Like, here's your assignment to ask the first question. Like, here's a pretty innocuous first question, right? But even just starting to open up that conversation where it feels like, okay, we're all in this together, and this like collectively, even if you are neurotypical, dating sucks. And like to create this pocket where they might not necessarily have friends to talk about like in their day-to-day lives, so almost creating like not necessarily like branded as a support group, but it's always fun to sort of like meet your friends over brunch and be like, oh, can I just tell you how I screwed up this date? Right? Like, because it does take vulnerability, but there is also the ability to see humor in it. So I think really just like making it a comfortable environment and having someone brave enough to be like, I will share first. And that's why with Goblins, and Intraflirt University, I'm usually the one that's comfortable being like, let me tell you about the time I epically screwed up on a date,
My husband's not home, so I can share this with all of you, but I thoroughly enjoyed dating. Dating can be a lot of fun.
It works for some, not for others, right? Um, you both had talked a little bit about safety, sort of those first date tips, things to be aware of. There have been some questions about how often, do you know that people are visiting that information, engaging with that information through your platforms? I'm curious if you've had situations where there's been a concern raised by one of the people who are participating, where there was maybe an inappropriate interaction or something they did not feel comfortable or safe with, and how you handle that, or how would you handle that if that hasn't come up?
So because our site is set up in a way to sharing this transparently with all of you, that it's set up in a way to be bigger, right? We want folks to join the dating site. We want them to understand that there's a big pool and there's a large, organization behind them, to help get more people on the site and really fuel the opportunity for them to find love. So from our point of view, we do have a customer service team. And if folks, submit that feedback, we launch what I'll call an investigation, but then go into and understand, what was the experience, what was said, so on and so forth. And as I mentioned with UniPi, we do actually have some tech behind the scenes actually monitoring the conversations. And we will be triggered if there is a keyword that is shared. So even though if the individual did not feel like something someone said kind of stepped over that boundary of safety or harassment, we've set up that boundary of what we believe to be inappropriate or unsafe language or an unsafe environment.
Yeah, on the Intraflirt University, that is rather insulated. So in terms of the course, there's typically not too much interaction between students or folks. On the Goblin side, we do have a very strict code of conduct. We believe in sort of proactively making sure that folks know what we're about, right? So we're very much impact over intent, right? Always assume the best from folks. You have to be honest. And a lot of these things do sort of cut people off at the pass in terms of some of the problematic behavior that they might show on a typical dating app, right? So if you are interested in dating, say that up front, right? You can't just like sneakily weasel your way into being friends with a woman and then be like, surprise, I actually just want to date you. So we do take it extremely seriously in terms of Goblins sort of being a first line of defense in terms of being like, hey, maybe if people in your real life have not told you that something that you're doing is off-putting and is leading to people to stop talking to you, we actually will kindly step in and be like, hey, so like, have you noticed that maybe like if you tweak your behavior a little bit, like it might come across as a little bit better, right? And we are going to be pulling in behavioral surveys, right? So being like, hey, before you met with Lise, how are you feeling? And then after you've met with Lise, how are you feeling? And then we'll be able to sort of see if you are consistently leaving people worse for the wear. We might want to have a conversation with that person and diagnose what's happening. But typically, I think a lot of neurodivergent folks that are upsetting people, it doesn't come from a bad place. It comes from a lack of education.
Good point. Does anyone have any more questions for our presenters? We have another question. Do either platforms go on the road to universities for guest speaker engagements regarding educating?
Well,
Sorry.
I have a Goblin car that is fully branded, and I pet sit around the country for gaming conventions. So I am never opposed to doing a fun talk. I truly believe that there's such a cool opportunity in terms of being able to interact with students and be able to sort of, again, the rising tide lifts all boats, start that conversation. So 1000%, I would be open to it if Stephanie wants to road trip with me. Amazing.
Let me finish that question. I'm sorry, I cut off. And this is for speaking engagements regarding educating neurodivergent students joining online dating for the first time. But
Sorry about that,
that's
Tony.
always a great topic to include. Yeah. Stephanie?
Yeah, I would agree. Lise, we've never talked about this, but do you do trusted house sitters?
Yeah.
Okay, so am I. So maybe we will. But for UniPi, yes, we often we do a lot of we've only really done the tri-state area, but not opposed to going outside of that. And truly, we enjoy that a lot. just kind of getting, into those environments and getting a small group and sitting around and giving them the opportunity, sharing some things with them, but then giving them the opportunity to kind of test out the things that they just learned, seems to be extremely valuable. And we've gotten great feedback from the folks that have kind of facilitated that from the specific groups and what have you. Now, even though we've historically only done smaller groups, of 20 to 30 folks, that doesn't mean that we would be opposed to doing something larger. We just haven't had that opportunity quite yet.
Great. We are closing in on the end of our hour. I want to give a huge thank you to our presenters, Stephanie and Lise today. We thank you for your time, your knowledge, and clearly your passion, because I think it's provided a lot of valuable information for us today. I want to remind everybody, if you would please use the link in the chat to complete today's survey. We would greatly appreciate your input. And then the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Thank you all again for joining us. And thank you, Lisa and Stephanie. Stephanie, do you have something to add?
Oh, I did. I was just going to ask, are you going to share our information with all of your members so that if they feel inclined to reach out or ask additional questions, they can do so?
Absolutely. I'll be sure to do that. Yes.
Your slides, your contact info, and then a recording of this
Yes.
session.
Great.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Please do the eval. It really helps. All right. I think we're good.
Bye, Stephanie.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you. Okay. And let me end.
We're all
I need
set.
to stop recording.
Yeah.